Welcome to the analysis of Civil Services Mock 6 2015 Paper 2. This mock consists some 8 passages and a few questions on decision making. We will be discussing some of the difficult passages in this paper. So let us begin with passage number 2 of the paper. The passage here says that around the end of the Second World War, there was a naive view in development economies that growth was mainly a matter of capital investment. Further, since the private sector was not equal to the task, the state had to take the lead. So India's first 5 years plans were largely about state investment in infrastructure, that is capital investment. Human capital, as economists call it today, was badly neglected. This development strategy had little to do with Nehru. It was in fact common around the world at that time, and it was very enthusiastically supported by economists. Anyway, it had some results. Prolonged economic stagnation under the Raj gave way to the so-called Hindu rate of growth. But clearly, something was missing. Among early voices of dissent was none other than economist and future Nobel laureate Milton Friedman, who came to India in 1955 and submitted an enlightening memorandum to the government of India, where he warned against policies that increase physical investment at the expense of investment in human capital. Some Indian economists were on the same wavelength also, notably B.V. Krishnamurti, who wrote a sharp note of dissent on education policy in the same year, where he castigated the government for applying the calculus of private grocery merchant to a matter like education. Another dissident from a very different point of view was Dr. Ambedkar, who saw mass education as an essential for the liberation of the oppressed. Later on, further advances in development economies vindicated these critical thinkers. Needless to say, physical capital is important for growth, but so are human capital, economic institutions, and other things, for instance, social norms that we do not understand very well. Further, growth is not the same as development. So here the author is trying to differentiate between growth and development in the broad sense of an improvement in the quality of life and expression of human freedoms. Growth can be an important tool of development, but the extent to which growth translates into development depends both on character of the growth process and on various forms of public action. For instance, good nutrition, which is essential for the quality of life, depends a great deal on public action in fields like nutrition, education, safe water, health care, and much more. So this is an example given here. So the first question asks you about the central theme of the passage: the importance of investing human capital for development, balancing investment between physical capital and human capital, the neglect of human capital in India, or the various paradigms of development. Let us see. We can very clearly say that option C is the best option here, because it very well encompasses the main idea of the passage. The passage discusses the priority given to physical capital over human capital. In fact, the very first paragraph, if we look at, it says that human capital, as economists call it, was very badly neglected. Also, the later part of the passage give instances of economists like Milton, who warned the Indian government against policies here that concentrated on physical investment at the expense of human capital. This also highlights how physical investment was increased and human capital was neglected. Thus we can say that C is the correct answer. Let us see why the other options are incorrect. If we look at A, it says the importance of investing human capital for development. Well, the passage very clearly highlights the neglect of human capital rather than highlighting the importance of investing in human capital for development. The passage is more focused on how human capital was neglected and not very much how human capital is important. So this is incorrect. Balancing investment between physical capital and human capital, this is also incorrect, because balancing of investment has only been discussed in the last paragraph of the passage, so it is very narrow in scope and does not form the main idea of the passage. The various paradigms of development this is like completely out of scope, so this is incorrect. Consider the following statements. Most Indian economists in the 1950s and 1960s were in favor of investing heavily in physical infrastructure. Mass education was completely neglected in the 1950s and 1960s. Well, as for the second statement, the passage does say that the approach to mass education was flawed, but it does not say that mass education was completely neglected as such. So this is incorrect. Most Indian economists were in favor of investing heavily in physical infrastructure. There is no statement in the passage that says that talks about the opinion of Indian economists in general. So this is also incorrect. Therefore, the answer will be option D. Why has the example of the private grocery merchant been used in the passage? Is it to illustrate the flawed approach of the Indian government towards education, to highlight the difference between human and physical capital, to demonstrate the need to adopt a better growth strategy, or to highlight the failings of India's growth strategy? Let us go back to that part of the passage which gives us this example. It is here, it says Mr. Krishnamurti, who wrote a sharp note on dissent on education policy in the same year, where he castigated the government for applying the calculus of the private grocery merchant to a matter like education. So as per this, it is very clear that the correct option is option C, to illustrate the flawed approach of the Indian government towards education, because that's what that particular line talks about. There is no mention of human and physical capital to demonstrate in that particular line. To demonstrate the need to adopt a better growth strategy, we are not talking about growth in that particular line. To highlight the failings of India's growth strategy, again, it is not related to growth strategy. It is in fact related to education, and the issue of education is not correctly addressed. This is what the line is trying to say and the example is trying to say. Consider the following statements. India's first 5-year plan's development strategy was in sync with the prevalent strategy globally. Well, this is a correct statement as per the second paragraph here, which says that this development had little to do with Nehru. It was common around the world at that time and enthusiastically supported by economists. So as per this, we can say that it was in sync with the prevalent strategy globally. So this is correct. Few prominent economists who were against this strategy raised their concerns, which were substantiated later with development in economics. Well, this is also correct. If you look at the third paragraph here, This line here says that later on, further advances in development economics vindicated these critical thinkers, the critical thinkers that have been spoken about above here. So as per this was yes, this was later substantiated, and this is correct. The author has used the phrase Hindu rate of growth to highlight the failings of India's growth strategy. Well, this is incorrect, as the Hindu rate of growth is used to highlight the government's approach, that the government's approach did yield certain results. Only to highlight the results of the government has this phrase has been used. It's here in the second paragraph, because it says anyway it had some results. Prolonged economic stagnation under the Raj gave way to the so-called Hindu rate of growth, but clearly something was missing. So it's basically the author is trying to has used this phrase only to highlight that there were some results of it, and not to highlight the failings of India's growth strategy. So this is incorrect. Therefore, the answer will be option B.